Hey there, and welcome to the Banksy and Perko Show.
This show is all about inspiring and strengthening leaders like you
To push back against decline and disillusionment and lead thriving churches that keep on reaching unchurched people.
Stick around, as in each episode, friends Duncan Banks and Jason Perkins invite you to sit in on the conversations they're having in their life and leadership, as if you were around the table with them.
Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss a thing.
Now let's dive into this episode.
G'day everyone, welcome to the Banksy and Perko Show, episode 1, Duncan. And we are kicking things off with a very unique topic. We're helping leaders navigate the crazy world of online church and in-person church, this whole hybrid thing. But we're kind of going in a fun direction today. Tell us what we're going to be talking about, Dunk.
Well, this is a bit risky. It's a bit risky to talk to church leaders about marriage and romance and, as they call it in the UK in churches, sex, because you can't actually say sex, so you have to call it sex. No.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about that, which is a departure from what we normally talk about, but it's really important. And actually, one of the reasons why it's important today is this is being, I don't know when you listen to this, but this is being released on Valentine's Day, the day of love around the world. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to talk about romance and love and sex on our podcast.
Yes, that's a great idea. And Valentine's Day, Duncan, is one of my favorites of the year. I absolutely love it. Kristen and I, we go all out when we celebrate Valentine's. So
good. And well, tell me, what's the most romantic thing you've ever done for your wife? Go on, think about it. Tell me.
The most romantic thing I've ever done for my wife.
Yeah,
she would say, Duncan, the most romantic thing that I do is I make her a flat white every morning before she gets out of bed.
Wow, that's dedication.
And it's just a habit I got into years ago, and for whatever reason, it's paid off huge dividends.
There's nothing like a bit of latte art to get the juices flowing in a marriage.
Yes, and my latte art is very, very special.
Is that right?
Most mornings, Duncan, it looks like some sort of cloud formation, as I like to refer to it. I tell her what type of cloud it is in the latte art.
So what do you do? You say you go all out for Valentine's. What do you do on Valentine's? Do you actually, on the February the 14th, you actually make an effort?
Yeah, we're big dinner out people. Like, we love going to new places that we've never been to before. Tend to try and find some fancy spots. One Valentine's Day, I took her to dinner at one of those Michelin star rated restaurants, which was, just phenomenal restaurant. One Valentine's Day, we climbed a bridge in the city that we live in. We did one of those bridge climbs. Do they do those in London?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you guys? Which bridge would you climb?
Tower Bridge, which is the famous one with the big, with the bridge that lifts.
Pylons.
So boats can go through.
Yeah.
So there's a glass floor, so you can walk across the top of it and look down. It's kind of scary because it's quite a long way up, but it's exciting at the same time. So we've done that. It's brilliant. And there's some beautiful restaurants just around Tower Bridge. There's some world famous, the Ivy and Gauchos and places like that. So really good.
Yep. No, that's cool. What's the most romantic thing you've ever done?
Okay, I'm taking you back a little while now.
Okay.
So my game needs to lift, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But the most romantic thing I did was quite a while ago. Do you remember there was a TV series called Sex in the City?
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
I think it was in the 90s, early 2000s. It was huge.
They just brought out a remake of the whole thing that completely is tanked. People don't like it for some reason.
Really, I've not seen it. But Debbie loved Sex in the City back in the 90s, early 2000s. And so we watched the TV series religiously. Well, she did. And then they brought a movie out. And she said, "Can you take me to the movie?" So I went, and no problem. We went to the movie, and there were 300 people in the movie theatre and one man, which was me. All the rest were women.
Did you have to turn in your man card at the door?
Oh, well, actually, it was kind of embarrassing to start with, but then I could kind of hear the whispers of people saying, "I wish my fellow would come to the movie with me. Why do I have to take my girlfriend?" Something. So I won some brownie points for that. But in the movie, there was a scene where they'd gone into a restaurant. Her and her fella had gone into a restaurant, and there were, I can't remember who it was, but the balloons, they had helium balloons that were, stuck to the ceilings, and there were little trails coming down from the balloons hanging about head level when you sat there, and they had little notes on the bottom of each of the kind of little tag that came off the balloon. So when it came around to Valentine's Day, I got all the kids dropped off with some friends to stay the night with some friends, and I got Debbie to go and drop all the kids off, and while she was out, I blew up 50 helium balloons, which filled our dining room, and I'd written notes to go on the bottom of each of the little tags that hung down. I put candles, everything, which was a bit dangerous, candles and helium, I know, but I put it all into the room. I'd made her some food, and I put my best 3-piece suit on. So when she came back, she walks into this house with these helium balloons. She literally stood there at the doorway looking, her eyes weeping.
Wow.
She was just like that. That's the best thing I think I've ever done romantically. So it was fun. It was fun.
So
memorable.
good, so good, mate. I love that. So hopefully, if you're listening to this podcast on Valentine's Day, hopefully you've already done something really, really romantic, and you haven't left it to the last minute. But if you haven't, there are some ideas that maybe you could use to also be incredibly romantic this year as well. So. Great job, Duncan. I think that was a great idea.
Well, Jason, we've departed from the normal route of this podcast, the Banksy and Perko Show. What do we normally talk about? Sum it up in 60 seconds for us.
Yeah, we're trying to help leaders, Duncan, navigate the complex world of leading churches that people that don't normally go to church would love to come to in this kind of hybrid world that we're living in, where people are both engaging online, but they're also engaging in person. And how do you blend those two things together? Not just take what you're doing or what you used to do in person and slap on a bunch of digital platforms like Instagram or a web, stream of your service, but how do you actually integrate both online and in person in such a way that you reach people that don't normally go to church? That's what we're all about.
In this COVID crazy kind of pandemic world we're living in, we know that leadership is complicated. And we know that you want to get it right. And so this podcast is designed to help you to do just that.
Yeah.
So, Jace, let's dive into this subject of Valentine's Day. What are your top 3 tips? How long have you and Kristen been married now?
22 years. 22 years. So,
what's your tips from
Duncan, you and Debbie?
This is our 30th year. We're having our 30-year celebrations this year. So, a bit longer than you, because I'm a little bit older than you. Yeah. But what are your tips from a long marriage? What are your tips about keeping marriage spicy when it comes to these kind of romantic things? Give us some ideas.
I'm going to be able to take 0 credit for any of these ideas, Duncan, because I stole them from other people along the way. But the first one is getting to really know your spouse, like in detail. I watched my father every Mother's Day, Valentine's Day. I watched my father as a boy growing up, and he always knew exactly what to buy my mum. He always knew her sizes, whether it was shoe size or even underwear size or dress size. He knew her style. He knew everything about my mum. And so when I was first married, I actually got a little book, Duncan, called My Wife. And it's a great little tool that you can just ask questions when you're out on dates, or you can ask questions when you're just, together in the car or something, about their favorite things and their sizes and all those kinds of things. So I'm never without a great idea of what to purchase and what size to get it in or whatever because of that.
See, that's great, but have you figured out? That's brilliant. But have you figured out what 12 or 14 or 16 means? I mean, what?
Well, here's what
12 of what? What?
Here's what I know to be true, Duncan. When in doubt, always buy the smaller size. So if you're not sure if it's a 12 or 14, buy the 12. They can always return it and get the 14 if they need to.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. So that was hugely helpful for me. Basically, I would say it this way. Become a student of your wife. If you want to have a long-lasting marriage, become a student. And let's be honest, Duncan, even though I may have learned some things in the first 5 years of marriage, doesn't mean they're still the same today. They can change their mind anytime. That's their prerogative. So just become a lifelong learner, lifelong student of your spouse. I think that's a massive, massive part of longevity in marriage. So yeah, that's a big one for me.
That's great. What else? What else have you got? I mean, I've not thought about that, to be honest. I've not thought about that before, but this idea of understanding what your wife's love language is, understanding what makes them tick, understanding what's important to them. It's kind of intuitive, but if we keep it in the front of our brain, and the idea of knowing, I mean, that's great, because I don't really know what my wife's dress size is. I'm just not sure. So I think that's quite a useful thing. So I'd steer clear of buying her clothes. I've bought her 2 rings. I bought her a ring when we got married, and it was so, I mean, it fitted the girl in the shop, but she obviously had fat fingers because it didn't fit my wife. And so I bought her another one on our 30th wedding anniversary back in August last year. And that didn't fit either. So I had a terrible time with that. I should have known her ring size. So again, she loved it, but she had to take it back and get it changed. Yeah. So, yeah. What else have you got for us, Jason?
I try to pay attention to those things, but you actually brought up the second thing that I was going to talk about, Duncan, is becoming a learner, a lifelong learner, a student of your wife. I think the idea of understanding their love languages is really, really important. So for my wife, acts of service just mean the world to her. So the fact that I make her a coffee every morning actually starts the day with a deposit. And that may not be the same for your spouse. That, you know, whoever's listening to this podcast, they might be saying, well, my wife or my spouse acts of service is not a big deal for them. It's, you know, quality time, or it's, you know, physical touch or something else. But I think becoming that lifelong learner, and then what I would say is once you know, learn what their love languages are, I would really recommend building in some habits, structured habits, where those things are just happening automatically. So for me, the habit of the coffee in the morning, that's an easy one for me. It doesn't take me long, 5 minutes, make that a daily routine or a ritual. And then, you know, that deposit of acts of service is just being deposited every single day for her. And it starts the day for her. So that would be the second thing I'd say.
That's so good, because oftentimes, you know, we do reduce our romancing to birthdays, Mother's Days and Valentine's Days. Yeah. And there are 363 other days where we can, you know, make a cup of coffee or empty the dishwasher or open the car door. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, I love that.
And then the last thing, Duncan, that I was going to encourage people to think about is learn to have fun together.
Oh yes.
So that's the big one. That's a big one for us. My wife and I, we have a weekly practice of Sabbath. We take a 24-hour period of time where we just rest and we don't do any paid or unpaid work. But what we've done over the years is we've discovered what's replenishing for each other. And so we focus on those activities that are fun and replenishing and really restorative for each other during that particular 24-hour period. But man, we have some of the best memories and just some of the best fun on our Sabbath because we're focused on the things that really replenish each other. And I think that that's massive. So for my wife, she's a huge fan of live music. So if you're ever on our Instagram feed, Duncan, you probably are going to see at least maybe once every fortnight some live music event that we've been to, because she just loves that. And it's so much fun. And so I would say find things that are fun that you can do together. That to me is really a big part of it.
And you know, that is so important, because it's kind of easy to do that when you're dating before you get married, you know, and then because you're chasing each other. And it's kind of easy to do that when you first get married. But after 22 years of marriage, it's something you have to work at, you know, finding time to have fun, to watch some live music, to go to a coffee shop so someone else can make your latte art and do it properly for you. You know, it takes a bit more effort and energy, doesn't it? You know, to put those things into your schedule. They're so, on Valentine's Day, Jason, they are so helpful to hear those things. I'm taking that away. I need to be a better student of Mrs. Banks. I really do. That's brilliant. I'm going to write some of the things down about her. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. You know, I went to, I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this till the day I die. I went to a friend's 25th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
And it was not far away from here. I'm sitting right by the River Thames in London at the moment, and it was just not. It wasn't far away from Tower Bridge, a place called St Catherine's Dock. Beautiful hotel overlooking the river, and they had music. They had a band, party, celebration. It was great fun. And then they did some interviews with Joel and Carol about their married life and having a bit of fun, a bit of laugh, kind of thing. And Carol said a few words about Joel, and Joel said a few words about Carol, and the host said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Joel and Carol, yay!" And just as Carol began to walk off the stage, Joel called her back. 25 years they'd been married. Joe called her back, and he said, "Darling, I've been keeping a secret from you for 25 years." And she looked at him, and everyone went quiet. And he put his hand into his pocket, and he pulled out a little book. And he said, "The day we got married, I started to write a diary about you and me, about what we did, who we are. And I haven't done it every day, but I've done it every week. And here are some memories about what I think about you and our marriage over the past 25 years. And he handed it over to her. I mean, for 25 years, he'd been romancing her in secret, and he dropped it on there. Talk about keeping the passion hot after a long marriage. I just thought that was genius. And I thought to myself, you might have thought, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. But, we've been married 10 years already. The boat's gone on that. Start now. Start now. You can do it now.
What's stopping you? You could be married for 50 years and capture the last 5 years or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I love that, Duncan. Such a great idea. So, Duncan, I know on a podcast like this, people were expecting us to say, well, we really are committed to praying together every day. And yes, we do those things. And I do think that is part of keeping your marriage, for the long term. But it's not just those things. I think you can be as very spiritually minded as you possibly can be, and maybe lose the spice in your marriage if you're not careful. Yeah. So, but Duncan, with that in mind, what does the Bible have to say about keeping your marriage spicy and sexy for the long haul? What do you think the scriptures have to say about that?
Well, and it's a bit daft, isn't it? This is supposed to be a leadership podcast, but it breaks my heart when you can see loveless leaders' marriages, and it breaks my heart when you hear about marriages drifting and people splitting up in marriage. So it is important for us to talk about this as leaders. And you brilliantly talked about 3 ways we can keep ourselves, romantically spicy. I just, and we might lose listeners over this, and we are taking a risk. But I want to talk about how you can keep your marriage spicy sexually.
Hey, Duncan, let me just be very blunt and honest. The flat white every morning, it does have rewards that come with that.
What, every morning?
I'm not, absolutely. I'm not just a barista here, folks, just pumping out lattes. There's got to be some reward on the other end of that latte.
Absolutely.
So tell us.
But the thing is, the church is not taught well. This is the other reason why I want us to talk about how you keep your marriage spicy in the bedroom sexually. Yeah. The church hasn't taught well on this over the years. I don't know if you realise this, Jace, but between the 3rd and the 10th century, the church actually forbade husbands and wives having sex on Thursdays because it was the day of Christ's arrest. You couldn't have sex on Fridays because it was the day of his death. You couldn't have sex on Sundays because it was the remembrance of the saints. You couldn't have sex during the 40 days of Lent or the 40 days of Advent or the 40 days of Pentecost. So if you followed these church rules, there were only 44 days a year available for latte art sex.
I'm just telling you right now. I'm telling you right now, Duncan, I would have had a special sex calendar so that I'd had a reminder on every one of those 44 days.
That's right.
It should pop up on my iPhone and tell me today's allowed.
But I've said this before, and some people say, "Oh, that, like you, that's terrible. I can't imagine that." And other people say, "Where do I get a calendar like that? It sounds fantastic." Let me take a minute or two. I want to tell you about 3 things about keeping your marriage sexually spicy, and I want to show them all to you from the first few verses of a book in the Bible called Songs of Solomon.
My favorite book, by the way. My favorite book when I was in middle school. I love that part of the Bible.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, the reason why it's so beautiful is because it's a husband talking to his wife.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the first principle about keeping your marriage spicy sexually. great sex starts around the kitchen table. So Jason, listen, I said around, not on, all right, for a start, the kitchen table. But it starts outside the bedroom. So this husband starts in the first verse of Songs of Solomon 4. He starts by just describing her, and he says, "You are beautiful, my darling, beautiful beyond words." But I love this because then he goes to actually, because it's quite easy to, especially on Valentine's Day, to put those cliches out there. You're so beautiful. But then he gets specific. Look what he says. He says, "Your eyes are like doves behind your veil." And here he goes. He says, "Your hair falls in waves like a flock of goats winding down the slopes of Gilead." He's saying to his missus, "Darling, you've got goat hair."
Yeah.
And the reason he's saying it is because everybody knew in that region that the Gilead goats had this beautiful black long hair. They were gorgeous creatures to look at. Yeah. So he's saying to her, darling, you've got that just stepped out of a salon look. It's brilliant. And so then he carries on. He says, "Your teeth are as white as sheep, freshly shorn and washed." And then he says, "Your smile is flawless. Each tooth is matched with its twin," which is kind of an odd thing to... Can you imagine saying to Kristen, Your teeth are lovely. Each one of them is... What he's saying here is, look, everybody, my wife's got teeth, which seems odd to us, but back in the day, no one had invented dentistry. You cleaned your teeth with a twig, picking bits of food out of it all. So it was really rare for a wife to have any teeth. So he's saying, babe, goat hair, great teeth, you are looking fly. You are taking care of yourself. So he does what you've been saying. He courts her, he romances her, he compliments her, he latte arts her. But the interesting thing when you read Songs of Solomon 4 is he doesn't lay a finger on her until verse 11.
Yeah.
And that's why I say great sex starts outside the bedroom. And I think especially for us blokes, I think we have to learn the art of non-sexual touching. Yeah. A bit more. The hug without the hubba. Yeah. There isn't an end game here. I just think you're gorgeous. I don't want to, kiss you on the neck and compliment you. And it's not because I want to jump in bed with you. It's this build-up, it's this romance. So, great sex starts, I think, outside the bedroom. It starts around the kitchen table. Make sense?
Yeah. Oh, mate, it starts in the kitchen. Absolutely. And essentially what we're talking about, Duncan, is really, really healthy foreplay.
Yeah.
Not the foreplay in the bedroom. It's in the car. It's at the shopping center. It's in the kitchen. It's all throughout the day. Just being completely in love and mesmerized by your spouse. Huge thing.
And that intimacy outside the bedroom leads to, like you were saying, rewards of intimacy inside the bedroom. Yeah. So great sex starts outside the bedroom.
Love it.
Starts around the kitchen table. Second thing, great sex is tender. We have to find the tenderness of sex again. So the next verse in Songs of Solomon 4, he says this, your breasts, he's describing his wife, your breasts are like two fawns, twin fawns of a gazelle grazing amongst the lilies. Yeah. I'm just picturing some guy who's been listening to this podcast, driving his car, he's just pulled over into the lay-by now. What the Bible talks about.
That was my life verse when I was in middle school, by the way. When people would ask me to share my testimony and my life verse, I'm like, I don't know if I can do that, but
yeah. Let me read you Songs of Solomon 4. Yeah.
No, but it's true.
But think about it. If you think about it for a minute, Jason, if you were hunting two fawns, how would you approach them?
Oh, very slowly. Very quietly. Very softly, yeah.
Gently, softly, carefully, tenderly. Because you know that if you were to jump out and go, oh, look at them fawns. I mean, they're gone. They've run away, Yeah. So I think we have to relearn and rediscover the beautiful gift of tenderness. Yeah. Otherwise, it just ends up becoming wham, bam, thank you, man. Yeah. And the third thing, the final thing I'm going to say on this spicy sex thing, if anybody is still listening to us, I can feel the keyboard warriors out there emailing in already. So great sex starts outside the bedroom. Great sex is tender. The third thing, great sex is also passionate. Why is passionate sex resolved or reserved rather for newlyweds? What's wrong with leaders in our generation still enjoying a passionate sex life? I was on a trip to Atlanta with some younger leaders from our church and visiting North Point Community Church. And it's like when you're away with other leaders, you have breakfast together, you stay in hotels, you've got long flights, and we were talking about marriage. And we were about a week into this trip, and one of the younger guys who hadn't been married very long, he said, I'm really missing home now. I said, oh, what are you missing most about home? So he said, a bit embarrassing this. He said, but I'm missing the sex. So I said, oh, it's not embarrassing, that's cool. So he said to me, Duncan, you and Debbie have been married a long time. When did the whole sex thing's so important to me? It's like every day in my mind. When did it all start to go a bit cold for you? What age were you when the sex started to drift and you started to feel less sexy, And I looked at him and I said to him, mate, I think I'd have to be dead and buried and in the ground for at least 3 days before you could actually say I was not thinking about sex anymore, you know?
Yeah.
But why is sex reserved for the newlyweds? Why do couples lose passion over 22 years or 30 years? I mean, obviously it's because we're distracted, kids distract us, life gets in the way, we get busy and the whole passion drifts. But I think, especially us fellas, we've got to take the responsibility to do some of the things we've been talking about on this podcast, to be the hero again, to bring the passion back, to start outside the bedroom, a hand in the middle of the bag, opening the car door, buying her a flower or a box of chocolates or a cappuccino or a flat white when it isn't Valentine's Day. Because look what he says in Songs of Solomon. You're not going to believe this. He says this, Songs of Solomon 4 verse 6. He says this to his wife. He says, until the morning dawns and the shadows flee away.
Wow.
Until the morning dawns. Our lovemaking until the morning dawns and the shadows flee away. What's he saying here? He's saying, babes, we're having Lionel Richie sex tonight.
Yeah, all night long.
All night long, all night. It's that. And this is the God who people think is anti-sex. God had the first sexual thought. God invented sex. God wants us to be passionate when it comes to... And I'm not even going to teach out the last verse. I mean, you'd have to read it and make your own conclusions because it makes me blush. But the next verse, he says to his wife, I'm going to hurry to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. I'm not even going to go there. But listen, final thing. I led a wedding ceremony just a little while ago, and the couple were lovely, Ben and Claire, and they stood in front of me, and we did all the vows and everything else. And then it was time for my talk, and they sat down on 2 chairs. She was in a beautiful white dress, best suit he'd ever got on, sitting in front of me. And I called them up to make this one illustration. I got them to stand in front of me, and I said, I know this is your wedding day, and they were holding hands and really close. I said, I know this is your wedding day, but for the sake of an illustration, just run with me. I split them up on their wedding day. I said to Claire, can you take 10 paces that way? And I said to Ben, can you take 10 paces that way? And I said, listen, on your wedding day, it's horrible, isn't it? You want to be close, and you will be close. But as life goes on, you will find yourself apart because life gets busy, kids come along, passion drifts, and you will find yourself apart. Let me tell you the secret, and don't ever forget it, of how you can come back together passionately and strongly. I said, here's the secret. You have a choice. You could either turn to each other and walk towards each other, or how about I play the role of God in this relationship? How about you decide when you feel like you're drifting, rather than turning to each other, why don't you turn to God? Why don't you start to walk towards God? Go on, both of you, start walking towards God. And they both started to walk towards me. And I said, look what happens. When you start to walk towards God, you end up close to each other. And the point I made to them is if we become better connected to the lover of our souls, then we'll become better lovers of each other.
Yeah.
If we become better connected to the lover of our souls, then we'll become better connected to each other. So, of course, great sex starts outside the bedroom. It's about romance and cappuccinos and flat whites in the morning. But when you start to fall in love with Jesus, then you become better lovers of each other. I'm taking a big risk here. I'm going to put my glasses on for this. I messaged a lady who I know has been married for 22 years, actually. And I said to her, tell us a bit about what your marriage, your relationship. And she said this. She said, marriage is not a contract, but a union. It can be beautiful and at times messy. It's not easy, but it's grand. When you carve out the time to build that relationship on a weekly basis, you discover deep love, trust, admiration and support. By the way, it's Kristen that I messaged. She wrote these words.
Yeah.
And I know you don't know this. So then she gets a bit more personal, Jace. She says, for us, we couldn't be more different. He's spontaneous, and I'm the planner. He's the dreamer, I'm the realist. He takes all the risks, and I play it safe. Despite our hilarious differences, he's my most favourite person. He makes me laugh on cloudy days. He reminds me that all will be okay when life seems to be uncertain. He encourages me daily that God has a great plan. I've loved the journey that we're on. I would have lived a very boring life had I not said yes to this guy. He's one of a kind, and I'm a lucky girl. That's what Mrs. Perkins thinks about Mr. Perkins. 22 years of a long marriage.
So if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, I'm a mess right now.
Well, we both are.
Yeah. But if you're listening to the podcast, I couldn't resonate more with what Duncan said. If two people passionately pursue Jesus,
Yeah.
they will become a better husband, a better father, a better lover, a better spouse, because you're passionately pursuing the one that can transform your life. So, yeah, that's a great word, Duncan. And those words from Kristen. Thanks, mate. That was a gift. As I was listening to you read them, I thought, what a gift that my mate in London would reach out to my wife.
Wow.
So thank you for that gift. Yeah. Well, the sun is rising in old London town. I can see it through the windows. And
it's going to be a great day.
The sun is setting in the beautiful Olympic city of Brisbane 10 years from now. Yeah. So we are on opposite sides of the planet, but I feel like we are best mates who get to hang out and do a podcast together, and I'm super grateful for this conversation today. And I hope for those that are listening, you'll take some of these simple little ideas that we've shared today, and perhaps in some small way this will make your Valentine's Day even better than it was ever before. That's my hope.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Duncan? Any final words?
No, I'm so glad we tackled this and we didn't push it under the carpet and we were honest about it. I'd love to hear people's opinions. Get in touch with us. You know, you can find us on the socials. I'd love to hear what you have to say about these things. I really would. It would be great. And we're looking forward to diving in for the next few weeks to look at some leadership topics and leadership issues that will help you to go further faster in terms of leading churches that unchurched people just love and can't stay away from. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to, you know, it's an excuse for you and I to chat once a week and to record these things, and I can't wait.
Well, thanks so much for listening. Like Duncan said, check us out on the socials. Banksy and Perko Show on Instagram is the best way to connect with us. We'd love to chat with you online. Until next time, we'll see you online.
So that's it, folks. You've been listening to the Banksy and Perko Show.
And we hope sitting in on that conversation has inspired and strengthened you in your life and leadership.
If you want to get into Banksy and Perko's contacts, then hit the link in the show notes to subscribe to the mailing list,
where they'll send out episode updates
and additional content and resources from time to time.
And of course, hit subscribe if you haven't already so you never miss an episode.
Duncan Banks is director of the Further Faster Network in the UK and Ireland.
Jason Perkins is director of the Irresistible Churches Network in Australasia.
If you are a church leader in any of those regions of the globe and looking to explore what it would take to reach the unchurched people in your community, then they're your guys.
Check out the ways to reach them in the show notes. See you next time.